Hey everybody, chapter 12, lesson 2 here. What we're taking a look at is, again, this question of what sacrifices do people make in war, right? And we've been looking at that so far from here at the home front. We're going to take a look at this more in depth from the American perspective during the war in the Pacific against Japan. So we're going to start with this issue of dignity, and that Americans will be sacrificing their dignity in something known as the Bataan Death March. And we'll do some more with this possibly in class. But what I, what I want you to realize is that late in 1941, as we know, December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor is bombed, and at the same time, our colony in the Philippines is going to be attacked. So let's just kind of set the stage for you so that you understand what we're talking about. Pearl Harbor is over here, right? It's on the other side of the map. It's off the map, actually. But here's Japan, right? That's where our enemy is going to be. And here are the Philippines. That's our colony. And what we'll see will be the Philippines attacking both of these places. And what that means is that if we blow this up, kind of what does that look like? And so here are the Philippines, and the area that we're talking about where Americans will be sacrificing their dignity is this little bit of the Philippines called the Bataan Peninsula. And so what happened is Americans had retreated all throughout the Philippines to this one little area right there. And what happens is that our generals retreat and evacuate, but 78,000 prisoners of war are caught in that little tiny peninsula, and they're forced to march sick with very little care at all, 65 miles to a prison camp, and 10,000 are going to die in the space of what's going to be about 4 to 5 days. And it is an atrocious tragedy that Americans endure. And the dignity that they give as they are run over by tanks, as they are forced to witness brutal killings and rapings, as they are buried alive in trenches filled with their own diarrhea, as they are forced to die of heat stroke and lack of water. It really is a catastrophic journey, and it's a real blow to the American morale. We as a people are upset and sad that we have lost not just Pearl Harbor, but also the Philippines. And FDR, our president, wants to raise morale. He wants to get us feeling like we're back in the fight. He wants to bomb Tokyo. If they can bomb our harbor in Pearl Harbor, if they can take our colony in the Philippines, and we want to strike back at them. But we really can't fly our planes there because none of them are capable of flying that far. So what we need to do is use aircraft carriers to launch these bombers and then have them land. But the problem is we can't get close enough to do that. So we replace the normal bombers on our carriers with B-25 bombers, and there's a picture of one of the ones that actually went off to attack Tokyo after we lost the Philippines and after Pearl Harbor was bombed. And what happens is that we send these planes aloft to bomb Tokyo, raise our morale, but they're not going to be able to fly back. So essentially what we're doing is saying to our pilots that this is a potential suicide mission, that they will be able to take off but may have to land in China or the Soviet Union. James Doolittle is the captain of this expedition, and in April of 1942, they do drop bombs on Tokyo, and it does threaten the Japanese emperor with death. This is a big deal, because remember that the Japanese consider their emperor a god, and we are able, by dropping bombs on Tokyo, to threaten the life of their god. This is a really, really big deal. Unfortunately, so few of the American pilots are actually able to escape. Most of them are caught and captured. This is one of the American pilots. The Japanese killed tens of thousands of Chinese civilians and soldiers searching for the American pilots that would dare bomb their emperor, their god. And when they were found, they were put on public display, and most were killed. So, what we have to realize here is that FDR is essentially willing to sacrifice men to raise morale. right? He has bombed Japan. That's what he's done. He's sacrificed men to raise morale by bombing Japan. And that's an important thing to understand, because just as American morale was hurt by the battles at Pearl Harbor and in the Philippines, our morale is raised by the bombing of Tokyo. By us striking back. And what this does is very, very important, because we have threatened the Japanese Emperor God. And that means the Japanese are going to respond. They decide to attack at a little place called Midway Island. Now, why would they do that? Why would they attack at a little place called Midway Island, which isn't even on this map? Midway Island isn't even here. It's not even an island that we could see on that map. And you might be able to see it on this one. Yep, there it is. So here's Japan, and we just bombed it, right? They've already attacked the Philippines. They've already attacked Pearl Harbor. And the reason why the Japanese are going to attack this little tiny island, why there? Because this is the place that our aircraft carriers came from. Our aircraft carriers traveled all the way across the Pacific. They launched those bombers. They attacked Tokyo and threatened their emperor, and then they landed in Asia. Japan thinks that if it can bomb and take over Midway Island, then we won't be able to send our aircraft carriers to threaten their emperor anymore. Japan will attempt to attack Midway Island, and at the same time, it's going to try and cut off the supplies to our ally Australia, and to do that, they want to attack New Zealand and New Guinea. So they're going to attack Midway Island, which is over here, and they're going to attack New Guinea in order to threaten our ally Australia. The interesting thing about this is that we discovered both because we had broken their code. So we send a fleet to the Coral Sea to stop the attack on New Guinea, and we send another fleet off to Midway to defeat the Japanese. Now these two battles, the Battle of Coral Sea, which takes place down here near New Guinea, and the Battle of Midway, which takes place just off Midway Island, are game changers. Coral Sea is a draw, but it does point out that we can hold our own against the Japanese Navy. And the Battle of Midway isn't a major American victory. We ambush the Japanese, we surprise them, we sink a number of their carriers and a number of their ships, and it's really the turning point of the war in the Pacific, because this is the biggest the Japanese Empire will ever get in the Second World War. So what we see then is in red the largest extent of the Japanese Empire, because they're unable to take Midway Island, but they do take the Philippines, they do take part of New Guinea, but they're not able to cut off Australia. And so what we have then is a chance for America to strike back. We've sacrificed men to raise morale by bombing Japan. We've also seen the Japanese willing to sacrifice men to raise morale to protect their emperor. And now we're going to see America begin to strike back. How are we going to do that? We're going to come up with an idea called island hopping. It's a pretty good idea. What it says is that basically we're going to hop from one island to another in the Pacific to threaten Japan. That we don't need every single island. We only need the important ones, because there's a bunch of islands between Pearl Harbor and Japan. I mean, if we were going to conquer every single one of these places and all the little islands that are out here in between, we would be fighting this war for decades. Instead, what we intend to do is attack only certain important islands, islands that we have to invade in order to keep us moving closer and closer and closer to Japan. So, what's tricky about this is that as we see Americans planning to attack these different islands that we feel are really, really important, and you can see some of them here, Guadalcanal in 1942, Coral Sea, the Philippines, Iwo Jima. As we're preparing to attack these places, what we discover is that most of them are something called atolls. Now here's the first one that we'll attack. This is called Tarawa. It's a tiny little island, not very big at all. Do you see all of this kind of light blue right here that I'm coloring in? All of this light blue is really, really shallow coral and sand reefs. It's really, really shallow. What's the big deal, you ask, right? Why does that matter? Why do we care that that's really, really shallow? Because we don't plan well. We end up sacrificing a ton of people, an unneeded sacrifice due to poor planning. 6,400 Marines will die in only 3 days fighting for this little teeny tiny island. Why? Because we didn't plan to fight this battle in a way that would keep Americans safe. What do you mean, Mr. D? Well, let me show you. These are two different landing crafts used in World War II. This one on the right, this is one that we used to use in pretty much traditional situations. It would just go up on the beach, the ramp would open, and we'd run off, and there you go. The problem was all of these atolls that we were working with were really, really, really shallow. And because they were really, really, really shallow, our soldiers weren't able, and these ships weren't able to get over them. They got stuck out to sea. And if they're stuck out to sea, that means that the soldiers aren't going to be able to get close enough to the beach, and you can just pick them off like ducks. The only one that is able to get to shore is this one, the one that we came to use in the Pacific. And it's called an Amphtrack. And you can even see its nickname, the Coral Climber. This is an Amphtrack that was able to get up and over those coral reefs in the Pacific and keep us from having more disasters like we did at Tarawa. Only one landing ship made it to the beach, and only 1 out of 3 Marines reached the shore. Thanks to that Amphtrack, though, we're able to better assault islands, and we advance again and again and again, so that by 1944, we're closing in on Japan from all sides. It's a series of slow, steady victories from islands like Saipan and Guam. Now, I'm going to leave this off by taking a look at what happens as General MacArthur approaches the Philippines. Leads attacks at Guadalcanal. The battle lasts for 2 years there. Americans win. He attacks Japanese forces in northern New Guinea, prepares to attack the Philippines. All of this is important because the Japanese are willing to make tremendous amounts of self-sacrifice. They will fight to the death, and they will use kamikaze pilots in order to win this war. Whether it's the largest naval battle in history, like we'll see with Leyte Gulf in the Philippines, or whether it is the invasion of the Philippines itself, what we'll see are Japanese soldiers who are unwilling to quit. For example, kamikaze pilots, suicide pilots who do extreme damage by crashing into their enemy. They're willing to kill themselves to kill the enemy. Of the 81,000 Japanese troops in the Philippines, 80,000 of them are willing to die. Only 1,000 will surrender. 100,000 Filipino civilians are killed in this battle. This is really important because it shows America that we are going to have to fight to the bitter end if we want to conquer Japan, that they won't surrender. We'll have to come up with another way. And we'll talk more about that in class when we get together over the next couple days.